The streets of Atlanta are buzzing, whispers turning into rumors, and rumors threatening to ignite a firestorm that no one saw coming. 21 Savage, one of hip-hop's most feared and celebrated names, is suddenly at the center of a storm darker than anything his music has ever revealed. Sources close to the scene claim that a friend of Lil Baby, someone loyal, someone untouchable in their own right, didn't just fall victim to the streets. They were allegedly set up. All fingers are pointing to a name that's supposed to be untouchable: 21 Savage. But how did it come to this? What secrets hide behind the flashy cars, platinum chains, and sold-out arenas? Hip-hop, for all its glitz, has always had shadows lurking in the corners, alliances, betrayals, and vendettas that run deeper than the charts. And now, the industry is shaken. Fans are asking, could 21 Savage really be capable of orchestrating something so cold? As we dig through text messages, insider testimonies, and connections that reach from Atlanta to the heart of rap's elite, one thing becomes chillingly clear. This story isn't just about a tragic loss, it's about power, trust, and the consequences when loyalty turns lethal. And when the truth comes out, the fallout could change the hip-hop world forever. From the outside, 21 Savage's life looks like a dream built on the ashes of struggler. Hood legend turned platinum-selling superstar. A man whose name commands respect both on the streets and in boardrooms. But behind the music, the interviews, the awards, there's a story most people will never hear. A story of betrayal, power plays, and consequences that stretch far beyond the studio. And now, that story has reached a chilling peak. The death of one of Lil Baby's closest associates. Someone whose presence in the Atlanta scene was as unshakable as it was influential. It started like any other night in the city. The bass from nearby clubs rattled windows. The streets buzzed with energy. And the nightlife of Atlanta was alive with both celebration and danger. But beneath the neon lights and the laughter, rivalries were simmering. Tensions quietly building among men who had known each other since childhood. According to sources close to the scene, 21 Savage and Lil Baby's circles had always coexisted in a delicate, balanced mutual respect, punctuated by subtle competition. But some say that balance didn't last, that a single misstep, a whispered betrayal, was enough to tip the scales toward tragedy. The night in question began unremarkably. Parties, studio sessions, and the familiar pulse of the city set the backdrop. But inside certain circles, messages were being exchanged. Texts, calls, warnings that hinted at something more sinister. Friends of the victim recall that he had received a call just hours before his death. A call that seemed to unsettle him in a way that was unusual for someone accustomed to the streets. He wasn't one to get nervous, not easily. And yet, that night, something about the tone, the urgency, the unseen hand behind the words left him on edge. Rumors began to circulate almost immediately after the tragedy. At first, they were vague, just whispers in the right ears. It wasn't random. This was planned. It came from someone he trusted. In hip-hop circles, trust is everything, and betrayal is often fatal. Sources claim that attention quickly turned to 21 Savage, a man whose reputation for street smarts and strategic thinking is nearly unmatched. The idea that he could orchestrate something from behind the scenes shocked many. Yet for those who know the history, it wasn't entirely impossible. Over the years, 21 Savage has carefully cultivated an image of controlled aggression. His music portrays a man who is both unflinching and calculating, someone who can survive anything the streets throw at him. But insiders say that the persona fans see is only a fraction of the truth. Beneath it lies a man who understands influence, who knows how to maneuver powerfully, yet invisibly someone who could, if provoked or motivated, make decisions with consequences that ripple far beyond his immediate circle. For Lil Baby, the loss was devastating. The victim wasn't just a friend. He was a confidant, a key part of a network that protected, promoted, and connected the rapper to the pulse of Atlanta's streets. And as the news spread, the hip-hop community reacted with shock, disbelief, and anger. Social media exploded with speculation, theory after theory circulating in real time. Some fans refused to believe that 21 Savage could be involved, defending him vehemently. Others, those closer to the inside, quietly nodded, acknowledging that the tension between rival camps had been quietly escalating for months. By the time investigators began piecing together the chain of events, the narrative had already taken on a life of its own. Every text, every late-night meeting, every whispered conversation was scrutinized. Surveillance footage was collected, statements were taken, and rumors, some accurate, some exaggerated, circulated faster than any official report. The streets of Atlanta, already aware of the delicate balance between its stars, watched closely as the story unfolded. The question on everyone's lips: how deep did this go, and who really pulled the strings? As night turns to day and the city moves on with its usual rhythm, the shadow of this tragedy lingers. What started as a single loss now threatens to redefine loyalties, friendships, and the very nature of trust in hip-hop's elite. One thing is clear: the lines between fame, power, and danger are thinner than ever. And when they blur, the consequences can be deadly. And for 21 Savage and Lil Baby, the next chapter is only beginning. The tension between 21 Savage and Lil Baby's camps didn't appear overnight. It was a slow burn, almost imperceptible to the casual observer. But anyone entrenched in Atlanta's scene could feel it creeping in. The streets have a way of sensing unease before it becomes visible. Mutual friends had noticed subtle shifts, text messages ignored, plans falling through, and more than one overheard conversation that hinted at frustration and resentment. It was the kind of tension that, if left unchecked, could erupt in catastrophic ways. On the night that changed everything, the victim, Lil Baby's close associate, was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or maybe, as some insiders suggest, he was exactly where someone wanted him. Accounts from those close to the situation suggest that surveillance, coordination, and timing all played roles that went far beyond coincidence. In hip-hop circles, rumors often start small but can carry deadly implications. And this night, the whispers were backed by chilling evidence. The victim's final hours were marked by a sense of unease that few understood. He had been texting, calling, and reaching out to friends in a way that indicated he sensed danger. Friends later recounted that he seemed distracted, even paranoid, which was out of character. Those closest to him described his behavior as off, something that would later be understood in the grim context of what was about to happen. And while the city's nightlife roared around him, clubs booming, parties thriving, cameras flashing, he was moving through the shadows, unaware of how orchestrated his fate had become. According to sources, 21 Savage's name surfaced almost immediately, whispered behind closed doors in recording studios, in cars rolling through the night, and on the street corners where information travels faster than law enforcement. Why? Because 21 Savage is a man known for his strategic mind, someone who never acts impulsively. Those in his circle know he weighs consequences carefully. To them, the notion that he could orchestrate something as meticulous as this tragedy didn't seem impossible. But suspicion alone isn't evidence. And yet, as investigators dug deeper, connections began to emerge. People close to both camps reported seeing unusual activity meetings that weren't on any calendar. Phone calls at odd hours, cars parked in suspicious locations. The victim, despite his instincts, may have underestimated how far-reaching certain alliances had become. The lines between friend and foe had blurred, and in that gray zone, a deadly decision was made. Social media, as always, amplified the fallout. Fans flooded platforms with speculation, theories, and accusations. Some called for calm, others demanded accountability, and still others pointed fingers. Some inaccurately, some eerily close to the truth. The narrative took on a life of its own, spinning faster than official reports could manage. And while the public consumed the story as another dramatic headline in hip-hop's ongoing saga of rivalries and tragedy, insiders knew it was far more than that. A calculated, devastating blow with reverberations that could last for years. The aftermath for Lil Baby was immediate and visceral. Losing someone so close wasn't just a personal loss. It was a blow to his empire, to the network of loyalty and protection he had painstakingly built. Friends and allies were on edge, wondering who could be trusted, and the atmosphere was tense, filled with uncertainty. Every decision, every interaction was now shadowed by suspicion. And somewhere in the city, 21 Savage's name lingered like a storm cloud unseen, but impossible to ignore. Insiders report that what followed was an almost surgical response. Allegiances were quietly reassessed, moves were measured, and contacts were monitored. The victim's death became more than a headline, it became a warning. In the world of Atlanta hip-hop, actions have consequences, and those consequences are often lethal. And while no one publicly accused 21 Savage outright, whispers continued to circulate. Those who know the streets understood. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon is patience and planning, not brute force. As investigators continued their work, the city itself seemed to hold its breath. The streets, the studios, the clubs all were under an invisible scrutiny. Who knew what? Who had seen what? Who would speak? Every piece of information mattered, every movement was significant, and the ripple effects were already being felt. For 21 Savage, the storm was building, and for Lil Baby, the challenge was more than coping with loss, it was navigating a battlefield where loyalty, power, and survival collided. This wasn't just a tragic story, it was a lesson in the hidden dangers of influence, ambition, and trust. And as the narrative continued to unfold, one thing became chillingly clear. In hip-hop, the stakes are as high as the fame, and the consequences can be deadly. Precise and inescapable by now, the story had begun to take on a life of its own. In Atlanta's underground circles, whispers were turning into conversations, and conversations into fear. The streets, always attuned to the slightest tremor of tension, sensed that something monumental had shifted. For 21 Savage, it was a storm that required careful navigation. His every move, every post, every appearance was being dissected by friends, foes, and the media alike. The scrutiny was relentless, because in situations like this, perception can be as dangerous as action. Those closest to the situation began piecing together a timeline that suggested coordination. The victim's movements in the hours leading up to the fatal incident appeared increasingly calculated, at least. That was the impression left by those reviewing footage and messages afterward. Every meeting, every phone call, every stop along the way was being analyzed for meaning. And while the public saw only a tragic headline, insiders were beginning to recognize a pattern that pointed to strategy. Not chaos. It wasn't just about one life lost. It was about influence, about control. 21 Savage has always been known for his ability to operate in multiple spheres simultaneously: the music industry, the streets, and the culture that connects them. Sources report that his circle, trusted and loyal, had been mobilized in subtle ways: communications, positioning, timing that suggested premeditation. While law enforcement worked to uncover concrete evidence, the scene on the ground was alive with speculation. People were watching, listening, and waiting. Lil Baby, meanwhile, was grappling with the duality of loss and suspicion. His grief was palpable, but it was intertwined with the reality of a game where trust is scarce. Every ally became a potential informant, every conversation a possible leak. For someone whose career is built on both talent and street credibility, the stakes could not have been higher. Friends close to him noticed a shift, not just in mood, but in strategy. Decisions were made cautiously, every movement measured, because the next mistake could cost more than reputation. It could cost lives. Inside 21 Savage's camp, the atmosphere was no less intense. Those who have worked with him describe a man who is calculating, observant, and fiercely protective of his interests. His reputation for patience and precision in both music and business had always served him well. But this was a different kind of test. Sources suggest that he maintained a low profile, letting rumors swirl while ensuring that any action was calculated, leaving little trace. In the world of high-stakes hip-hop rivalries, Invisibility can be a weapon just as deadly as aggression. Investigators, meanwhile, began uncovering details that painted a picture of meticulous planning. Phone records, witness accounts, and digital footprints hinted at connections that were previously unknown. Some details suggested coordination between multiple parties, while other pieces pointed to someone leveraging inside knowledge to orchestrate events without leaving direct evidence. The deeper the investigation went, the more complex the web became, a web that some insiders believe led straight back to 21 Savage. Social media amplified every theory, accusation, and hint of truth. Fans, commentators, and street analysts debated endlessly, trying to decipher the cryptic patterns and messages hidden in posts, interviews, and lyrics. Every public appearance by 21 Savage was scrutinized, dissected for signs of guilt, innocence, or intent. And while the world speculated, the real players knew the gravity of what had happened. This wasn't just a case of bad timing or random violence. This was a calculated move in a world where power is measured in influence, loyalty, and fear. The cultural implications were profound. Atlanta, already a hotbed of talent, politics, and street influence, suddenly found itself questioning allegiances. Music studios became strategic meeting points. Recording sessions doubled as discussions of loyalty, and even casual interactions carried weight. Every player in the game had to consider not just what they said, but how it could be interpreted, and by whom. The ripple effect was undeniable. One man's death had sent shockwaves through the hip-hop community, destabilizing alliances, creating fear, and forcing a reevaluation of trust. And at the center of it all was 21 Savage, a figure, both respected and feared, whose involvement remained unproven but whose influence loomed large. In a world where perception often becomes reality, the shadow of suspicion was enough to change the game forever, as the city braced for what would come next. It was clear that this story was far from over. Every move, every conversation, every decision now carried the weight of history, consequence, and survival. The streets of Atlanta, the culture that thrives within them, would never see this the same way again. As the investigation deepened, the complexity of the situation became impossible to ignore. Sources close to both camps reported that the fallout from the victim's death had begun reshaping alliances in Atlanta's hip-hop scene. Friendships once thought unbreakable were strained. Contracts and collaborations were reconsidered, and trust, a commodity already scarce, had become almost non-existent. The streets operate on respect and loyalty, and when either is called into question, the consequences can be devastating. 21 Savage, whose career has always straddled the worlds of mainstream fame and street credibility, now faced scrutiny on multiple fronts. People in his inner circle describe a man who is both cautious and calculating, fully aware of the implications of every decision. Unlike the chaotic reputation some associate with street rappers, 21 Savage has built a persona around control and strategic thinking. And now that careful balance was being tested in ways few could have anticipated. Every move he made, or didn't make, was dissected, interpreted, and weighed. For Lil Baby, the loss was both personal and professional. The victim wasn't just a friend, but a linchpin in a network that managed aspects of his career and street operations. Losing him sent shockwaves not only through his immediate circle, but across a wider network of artists, promoters, and managers. In the days following the incident, Lil Baby's team began reevaluating security protocols, communication methods, and alliances, knowing that in Atlanta, power dynamics shift quickly and unpredictably. Rumors regarding 21 Savage's alleged involvement persisted. Friends and insiders spoke of unusual meetings, late-night discussions, and movements that suggested coordination. Some claimed to have intercepted messages hinting at tension or possible retaliation. The lines between music business maneuvering and street politics blurred, with every observer trying to decode intent from limited information. And while law enforcement worked quietly behind the scenes, the streets were already forming their own narratives. Social media, as always, fueled the fire. Tweets, Instagram stories, And viral videos speculating on the connections between 21 Savage and the incident spread like wildfire. Some content was blatantly fabricated, while other pieces seemed disturbingly accurate. The online world amplified the tension, turning speculation into public pressure. Fans debated theories, reposted evidence, and constructed their own versions of the events, sometimes amplifying truth, sometimes creating dangerous distortions. For those in the know, it was a reminder that perception can be as influential as fact. And in a city where reputation can protect or destroy, the stakes had never been higher. Meanwhile, within 21 Savage's camp, caution was paramount. Sources claim that he and his closest associates were monitoring reactions, vetting information, and planning carefully. Every potential leak was considered, every alliance reassessed. The goal, insiders say, was to maintain control, avoid unnecessary exposure, and ensure that any response would be strategic rather than impulsive. The streets, as always, were watching, waiting to see which moves would reveal truth and which would conceal it. Lil Baby's circle, however, was not idle. Friends and associates began quietly gathering information, seeking clarity on what had happened and who could be trusted. Sources indicate that alliances were shifting behind the scenes, with certain figures siding cautiously with one camp or another. In hip-hop, influence is currency, and the balance of power is delicate. The death of one key individual had created a vacuum, and both overt and covert maneuvers were underway to fill it. Every new revelation seemed to increase the stakes. Investigators uncovered fragments of communication suggesting coordination. Insiders reported movements that hinted at premeditation. The victim's death was no longer seen as an isolated tragedy, it was part of a larger, intricate web involving loyalty, betrayal, and power. In Atlanta, where the lines between music, influence, and street credibility are tightly intertwined, this web touched more people than anyone could count. As days turned into weeks, one reality became undeniable. The incident was reshaping the landscape of Atlanta hip-hop. The fallout would influence decisions in studios, boardrooms, and the streets. Careers, alliances, and reputations hung in the balance. And at the center of it all remained 21 Savage, his name synonymous with both talent and suspicion. The question on everyone's lips: what comes next, and who will pay the ultimate price when the storm finally hits? The story was far from over. With tension escalating, loyalty shifting, and the truth hidden beneath layers of strategy and speculation, the stage was set for an explosive chapter in hip-hop's ongoing saga of ambition, influence, and deadly consequences. By the time of this saga unfolded, the streets of Atlanta were no longer just whispering, they were buzzing with speculation, fear, and anticipation. Everyone who mattered in the city's hip-hop circles had taken notice. Alliances had been tested, friendships strained, and loyalties quietly reassessed. One man's death had set off a chain reaction that threatened to redraw the entire map of influence. At the center of it all remained 21 Savage, a figure as enigmatic as he was powerful, whose every move was being watched with suspicion and scrutiny. Insiders described 21 Savage during this time as unusually measured, almost surgical in his approach, unlike the impulsive violence often depicted in headlines. Those who know him say he operates with strategy, precision, and patience. Sources close to the scene claim he and his inner circle began observing reactions from all angles, public statements, social media chatter, movements on the streets, making decisions based on calculated outcomes. In the world of Atlanta hip-hop, perception is as important as action, and 21 Savage understood that a single misstep could escalate an already volatile situation. Meanwhile, Lil Baby and his team were not sitting idle. The loss of his close associate had created a vacuum in both personal and professional circles, and he had to act decisively. Sources report that new security measures were implemented. Sensitive communications were tightened, and alliances that were previously considered unshakable were re-examined. Every interaction was scrutinized, every trust reevaluated. In an industry where loyalty is currency, the stakes could not have been higher. Rumors regarding the alleged involvement of 21 Savage persisted, growing more intense with each passing day. Some insiders claimed to have intercepted cryptic messages or witnessed strange behaviors that hinted at calculated maneuvers. Others noted the absence of certain individuals at critical moments. The city, ever attuned to nuance, interpreted these gaps and gestures as signs of strategy or potentially culpability. And while no definitive proof had emerged publicly, the weight of suspicion alone was enough to alter the dynamics of the community. Social media continued to act as both magnifying glass and battlefield. Posts, tweets, and videos circulated endlessly. Some shedding light on possible truths, others distorting reality for clicks and attention. Fans debated theories, shared unverified insider info, and dissected every public appearance. In a culture where image can dictate influence, the online narrative became just as powerful as the physical one, impacting reputations, careers, and street credibility alike. Within 21 Savage's camp, insiders report a climate of hyper-awareness. Every contact, every public statement, every movement was carefully curated to maintain control over perception. Observers note that his strategy appeared focused on minimizing exposure while keeping the narrative contained, allowing rumors to swirl without confirming or denying anything publicly. In Atlanta, where reputation can be the difference between dominance and downfall, controlling the story is often as crucial as controlling the streets. Lil Baby, however, was dealing with more than just strategic calculations. The emotional toll of losing a close ally weighed heavily on him, and sources suggest that grief mixed with frustration created a volatile combination. The lines between personal and professional blurred, and decisions became charged with emotion as much as strategy. The victim's death was not only a tragedy, it was a catalyst forcing everyone involved to confront the realities of loyalty, power, and the thin line between life and death in the world they inhabit. As the dust began to settle, a pattern emerged. Relationships were strained, alliances had shifted, and a new order was quietly being established. The streets had spoken through whispers, rumors, and subtle movements, sending a clear message: actions have consequences, and in this game, even a single miscalculation can be deadly. 21 Savage, Lil Baby, and everyone in their spheres were now operating in a landscape forever altered by one tragic event. This chapter of Atlanta hip-hop was a stark reminder of the consequences of influence, power, and loyalty. The death of Lil Baby's associate was not just a headline, it was a lesson, a warning, and a moment that would define careers, reputations, and relationships for years to come. And as the city, the culture, and the fans watched, the question remained: who truly pulled the strings, and what price would ultimately be paid for ambition, rivalry, and betrayal? The stage was now set for the next moves that could either solidify legacies or shatter them completely. And for everyone involved, the reality was chillingly clear in Atlanta. In hip-hop and in life, the line between fame and danger is razor thin, and crossing it can have consequences that echo far beyond a single night. The story of 21 Savage and the tragic loss of Lil Baby's associate is more than just a headline. It's a cautionary tale about power, loyalty, and the high stakes of the hip-hop world. What we've uncovered is just the tip of the iceberg. Behind the glitz, the fame, and the platinum chains lies a world where trust is fragile. Alliances shift like sand, and a single decision can change everything. Now it's your turn to be part of this conversation. Dive deeper into the drama, the secrets, and the hidden narratives that shape the lives of your favorite artists. Subscribe, follow, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the shocking revelations that continue to unfold in Atlanta's hip-hop scene. Every post, every story, every investigation brings you closer to the truth behind the headlines, the details that mainstream media often overlook, the insider information that paints the full picture. Engage with us in the comments, share your theories, your thoughts, and your reactions. Who do you believe is truly responsible? How do these events change the way we see the industry? The streets, the studios, and the charts are all connected in ways most people never understand but hear. You get the inside view? Don't just watch from the sidelines. Be part of the community that seeks truth, explores the hidden sides of fame, and analyzes the real consequences when loyalty, betrayal, and ambition collide. Hit that like button if you want more deep dives into hip-hop's darkest stories. Share this with your crew, and stay tuned as we continue to uncover the drama, the secrets, and the lives that hang in the balance. The story isn't over, and the next revelation could shock the culture like never before, ever before.